Some best practices in crafting articles, white papers, and ebooks. Writing content-heavy but appealing marketing content, such as white papers, takes strong writing skills and practice. Having a solid process to guide the writing effort will make these potentially daunting publications more manageable. So, something to keep in mind here is that on one hand, we're not necessarily writing academic papers unless you are doing certain types of highly technical white papers. For the most part, you are writing in such a way that it is easy for the eye to capture, but you're still writing with a certain sense of grammar and syntax and spelling and organization, and you need to be able to know how to put that message together in the written form that is going to be pleasing to the eye as well. So, best practice number 1, assess needs. It is necessary to have a clear vision of the goals that one is attempting to achieve, just like anything else that we've talked about with social media marketing and with any other sort of business goals and any goals in general. You need to know what you want the outcome to be. You need to have a vision for what the completed result is going to produce, and use that as the basis for how you put things together. There may be overt articles that are clear to the reader, things like educating the public about a product or providing information about a problem. Those things are going to be very plain as you read through a particular document. Or the vision may be more covert in its goals. They might not be directly mentioned as you're writing in the document. Things like increasing sales or creating doubts about the capabilities of competing products, whatever it may be. So it's kind of the underlying hint, intentional sort of things when you're trying to write in a more covert sort of fashion, as opposed to overt, here it is, plain for everybody to see. Second, plan. Start planning how the content will be constructed. Determine how the material will be distributed, and decide responsibilities and estimate costs. This is where you're kind of putting into place all the different logistics, the different action steps of how things are going to come together. Use SMART goals to be able to make those things happen so that you have good benchmarks for measuring your progress within the project, that you are meeting deadlines, that the material is holding up to standards that you need to have held up, all those sorts of things. Third, acquire information. After gathering the facts, analyze how they can support the goals set for the content. This is where you are doing your research and you are gathering up the data and the references and all those sorts of things that help to make what you want to say be seen as credible. Fourth, organize. Create a simple outline with groups and subgroups to represent different themes or strands of information. If you think about it, when you're putting together an article, and you're using headings and subheadings, really what you're doing is in text form, in readable form, you're creating an outline. And it's helping you to keep things in chunks as far as different associations with different major headings and all of that. And it's going to help you to be able to keep the flow of what you're writing nice and natural and neat so that people understand the scope of what it is that you're saying. Fifth, design the look and feel of your project. The page layout should center on ease of browsing. It shouldn't strain the eyes for people to be able to go on there, look for information. They shouldn't have to hunt for things and it be all cluttered up and difficult to find what they want rather easily. While articles, white papers, and ebooks should convene a lot of information, they should also be easy on the eyes and appealing to online consumers. A lot of times these things will be seen on a computer, and that may impact the visual appeal as opposed to printing out on paper. Remember to create a catchy title page, that the title very clearly explains what it is that you're trying to say and communicate, that the title truly represents the content of the article, and that it is something that is going to capture the attention of the prospective reader. And avoid cramped layouts. Keep some white space to make the text more readable. You don't have to cram everything onto 1 or 2 pages. Space things out to make that flow very easy to follow. 6th, go ahead and start writing. Audiences for these types of content expect to be educated, but they also want technical elements to be combined with narrative and other interesting content. So you want to write in such a way that you're not just listing a bunch of facts, that you're not thinking about the conversation that you're trying to have with the reader. You want to do the writing in such a way that people are attracted to read to what you have to say. Give them that ability to be able to follow the flow of thought, to be able to take in the information and read it in a maybe not necessarily a relaxed sort of way, but in a way that they will find very easy to do. Tangible information that assists in decision making will draw the most significant viewers towards the communication. So you want to provide very practical sorts of information here. You don't necessarily want to write in such a way that people have to figure out exactly what your intentions are. I mean, we did talk about with covert writing that perhaps you're going to be writing things in such a way that the intentions are somewhat hidden, are somewhat underlying. But in terms of the objective material that you're trying to put out there, you don't want to make people scratch their head and say to themselves, okay, what does this all mean? You want to be very clear with that and provide tangible information. Explain any acronyms that you use and use consistent wording when defining each concept. This is not a place to pull out the thesaurus and use all different types of words to talk about the same thing. You want to be fairly consistent in your terminology and in the way that you describe things so that the reader that is reading will be able to compare apples to apples. Keep the style direct and uncomplicated. Again, don't use flowery language. Don't make people scratch their heads and think about what it is exactly you're trying to say. Use the KISS principle. Keep it simply simple. If there is technical terms that are to be used, make sure, again, you keep in mind your audience. Any technical terms that are unavoidable that people might not know about, you want to make sure you explain very clearly. What about lists? Well, there's a couple of thoughts on lists. While more detailed than a list of tips, a list-based piece of content can provide valuable information in an easily digestible fashion for the hurried reader. So if you're listing, 5 different points on providing a successful sort of project, it could be a good way for you to be able to talk about those things individually. A lot of times, though, what tends to happen is that when all people do is provide different sort of lists for things, those lists can seem very shallow. They can seem as very closed-minded. They can overly simplify the issue that you're trying to talk about, and that could also turn off your audience. So you want to be careful if you're using a list in that you want to write it in such a way that it still leaves a bit of conversation that can happen, that the information that you provide is truly backed up with supportive evidence, to be able to substantiate that the things that you put in this list are things that are of vital importance, and perhaps maybe to discuss, depending on the topic, depending on the subjective nature of it, that perhaps there are things that are missing, or that the list is not necessarily comprehensive, or that there's room for debate on certain things. So you want to keep that in mind. Lists can help you with the organization process and the flow of thought, but it may not always be the best option. Finally, not finally, still got a couple to go here, illustrate. Especially with more complicated material, visual aids are essential in order to focus the audience's attention and to explain complicated concepts. You'll want to ensure that illustrations convey the primary content and selling points of the material. Don't use pictures and illustrations just for the sake of using pictures and illustrations. Make sure that they actually have substance and support the things that you are talking about, and help to be able to relate certain concepts that might be a little difficult to navigate through words in a way that people can very quickly and easily understand. This is where infographics have become a lot more popular in recent years, because you can use the combination of text and pictures to be able to convey a certain message. Review, revise, and approach. Catch factual errors or correct imprecise explanations. Also, you want to make sure that you check with your legal department, your accounting department, in order to avoid later conflicts. So this is the point where you are going through your document with a fine-tooth comb, and you are looking for any little detail that may be out of place or incorrect, or might not be in the best interest for you to publish. Do not skip this step. It is very important to make sure what you are producing is something that is legitimate and accurate. Finally, publish. Before publishing, always check the final output to ensure that it correctly has transferred from final draft to final product version. So perhaps this is something that you will print a limited number of copies of. Does it look as good on the computer as it does on a piece of paper? Does it look good in the various different types of formats that it may be on, whether it's a website or a social media site or a PDF or whatever else that you may have? If you're using different sorts of dynamic content like Flash or Java or other types of content that can be presented in different ways, make sure that it looks and reads and feels the way that you want it to look and read and feel. So there you go. There's the notes for Chapter 11. Make sure you take a look at the study questions. Be prepared with any questions or comments that you have when we get together to discuss these things.